I think it primarily matters to Greece. They have, to be quite honest, they have messed up their economy quite substantially. And although they have been given very, very substantial help by primarily the Euro countries, but also by IMF, accordingly by the UK and Sweden, there are question marks whether the present government is really either willing or able to do what is necessary to sort out the situation. That's tragic for everyone, primarily for Greece.
But if there is a eurozone breakdown involving Greece, will it affect, do you think, Britain or indeed Sweden particularly adversely?
Not necessarily, but of course we are all in Europe, and Greece is a partner country the one way or the other. We all love the country. We'd like them to be able to sort out these problems, and we'd like to be able to help. The Euro countries does help, the IMF does help. But at the end of the day, they'll have to do it themselves. But I think if things goes very wrong, it's going to be primarily, sorry to say, a major problem for the Greeks.
Do you think David Cameron is wise at this early stage of British negotiations to say, I know I won't get treaty change?
I think it's been fairly obvious for a long time, and I think that shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, that sort of a big treaty change is not going to happen with that particular time period. And I think it's good to recognise that. And then I think it's more appropriate, both from the UK and from the wider European point of view, to focus on the issues of substance, of reform that could be there, where a lot of the agenda that has been pressed by the UK over the last few years has now been mainstream agenda in Europe. But there are other issues that now needs to be addressed. And I think there is a constructive will to sort them out. Whether it will succeed, let's see.
Is it a problem for the European Union now that frankly, political leaders are afraid to have a treaty change on anything because it needs ratification in sovereign parliaments, government and national parliaments, which are likely to reject it, or indeed in those countries where they have a referendum, they're also likely to vote no? It's very difficult to see how constitutionally Europe can ever move forward.
Well, you can argue that, and there's a substantial element of that. But at the same time, I do think that one should be very, very careful with treaty changes. I mean, we change the constitution in Sweden every, I don't know, it could take 100 years until we do it. So that is the big framework, that you should not change that often. And we have the Lisbon Treaty, which is in force only since, 5-6 years by now. And I think virtually everything that needs to be done can be done within that. And then you can make other legally and politically binding commitments of different sorts on the side of that, or outside it, or on top of it. But I think one should be careful with constitutional changes in countries and treaty changes in Europe.
What about the freedom of movement of people within Europe? Because of the migration crisis, it's pretty clear that is unpopular in individual countries. Can anything be done about it?
Well, I mean, make the difference between sort of EU citizens and the migration crisis that we're having now. The migration crisis is a very major one. And I think it's fairly obvious, we listen to that now, that there will have to be some sort of solution that is common. We need to work together on that. There's not a UK or an Italian or Swedish solution. We'll have to do it together. As to the principles inside the single market, I mean, the fundamentals of the single market is there's a free movement of goods, of services, of capital, of ideas, and of people. And I think that's very difficult to change. Then there could be elements of benefits and other things that one could, and indeed one should, look into without discriminating against each other.
But can countries like Britain or indeed Sweden, where people want to go to, even from within the EU, particularly from Eastern Europe, can they absorb tens, if not hundreds of thousands of workers coming in each year?
Well, I mean, long term, we need more people, as a matter of fact. We have a demographic deficit in Europe. But I mean, the speed and the pace that we are seeing now is, of course, problematic. I mean, Sweden is taking, if we take it per capita, I think we are taking roughly 8 times as many as any other EU country. And accordingly, there is a need to share out the burdens somewhat. And that is why it's important for the leaders to sit down, as they are doing as we speak, to try to move this issue forward. It's going to be very difficult, but it's going to be even more difficult if they don't do it together, because this pressure is coming from outside of Europe, and it's more likely to increase than decrease in the years to come.
You've been in politics a long time. What's your guess? 5 years' time, are Greece and Britain still members of the EU?
Yes.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.